My name is Tom Doonell, and I'm here today to help talk about the start of the Umstead race. And
And I'm Myra Norwood. I'm the wife of Blake, who helped get it started too.
And I'm Charlie Barnes. I've been associated with the race since its beginning.
I'm Jerry Dudek, and I've been with the race since the beginning, and I helped with the aid stations and various other things, kind of getting things started, keeping it moving along.
a little bit of the prehistory, I think, as Gerald just said before we started the cameras, about how we got started. Jerry and Charlie and I and Blake got into just casual running at lunchtime, and we decided one day when we were running, Blake asked me why wouldn't I run a marathon with him, and I told him that I'd gotten tired of running marathons, and what I really wanted to do was go back and run the JFK 50 mile again. I'd run it in 1982, and I was a little disappointed in my time, and so he said, well, I'll run the JFK 50 with you if you'll run a marathon with me. And so we shook on it. And so we immediately sent off applications for the 1990 JFK race. And Jerry and Charlie and myself and Blake started training for that race. And as it turned out, that was one of our most great experiences together, because nobody had tried a distance greater than a marathon but me. And the most interesting thing to me in that race was that we all got up there at different times, and when I got up there, Blake, who really loved to plan everything to the hilt, that went out over the course with Jerry and Charlie, and he'd milk behind trees along the course so they'd always have enough food. And after Charlie seen how far he was going to have to run, he was in there sitting on the bed, and they said, Tom, you're going to have to go in and give Charlie a pep talk. Said he is, I've never seen. I went in there, and he looked as down as any human being I'd ever seen. And I said, Charlie, and he said, Tom, I've seen the course, I know. But anyhow, we had a great day. And immediately after that, I seen something about the Old Dominion 100-mile race. And I told Blake, I said, well, Blake, heck, we're in shape. Why don't we just go ahead and sign up for the Old Dominion? And so we did. All four of us signed up for the Old Dominion. And bless our hearts, we went up there. And it was a very hot day. And Charlie does not do very well in the heat. So somewhere around 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Charlie dropped out. And then about 6 o'clock, was going up this long hill, and Jerry sat down on a rock and said, I'm not going any further. So me and Blake kept on going, and then about 9 o'clock, a storm come up, and my feet were hurting, and it's 68 miles, and I said, that's it for me. And when the sun come up, Blake was still running. So that was the first experience that we had with a 100-mile race. And so me and Blake later on signed up and run the Western States, which was the first race that I completed along with Blake. And then we heard about this race called the Hard Rock 100 in Colorado. And I said, well, Blake, you know, this is a really toughie. Why don't we just go try it? And so when we read about it and realized they give 48 hours, we said, well, anybody can do 100 miles in 48 hours. I mean, that's a gift. And so we started training for it, and that was in 1994. And on the way training, we realized that we were going to have to try to run for close to 2 days. So we decided to set up a run out here in Umstead Park, and Blake measured a 5-mile course. And we got coolers, and Jerry agreed to bring us some food out and sort of crew us late in the day. So Blake and I was going to start running on Friday morning at 8 o'clock, and we were going to run all the way through Saturday. We were going to run for 2 days, overnight and for 2 days. And me and Blake started precisely at 8 o'clock on our measured 5-mile course, and we were running, and we run into Joe, who was on a training run for Vermont, I think, was the race that he was training for. And Joe was, me and Blake had already decided we were going to be very measured in how we run. And we got to running with Joe and talking, and Joe was really running us much harder than we wanted to go. So we were sort of happy when Joe left. And thank goodness he wasn't out there to run for 2 days. But as we got to running and we were keeping up with our laps and our time, all of a sudden it dawned on us, at sometime in the afternoon that if we kept going at the rate we were running, we were going to complete 100 miles in less than 24 hours. And that's the goal of every ultra runner, is to say you run 100 miles in one day. And so Jerry showed up with food. We decided to abort trying to run for 2 days and just keep the pedal down and try to run 100 miles in under 24 hours. And so as we ran, and Jerry was very nice that he brought us food and stayed out and watched us, and Blake let it surface that he had a strong desire to start a 100-mile race. And he wanted it, we've run some races, a lot of races, and some of them had good food and some of them had practically no food, and Blake wanted this race to rival or be better than the Western States. But the Western States is just such an awesome event with the food. You go into an aid station, the watermelons are seeded, the cantaloupe are cut up. So he said he wanted it to be a first class event, and he said he would only do that if I would sign on and Jerry would sign on to help him. And so I'm not sure when we approached Jerry, because me and Blake was running and we were talking, and we kept talking about it, and finally I told him, yes, I would help, but I would not be the main player, but I would do, I would do my fair share if Jerry would help. And
Yeah, I think we said that, if you're willing to be a race director,
Yeah.
well, we're certainly willing to help, because that's the hard part, being race director. And I mean, he took on many more responsibilities than just a race director. So he did a just fantastic job. Fantastic.
So Blake and I kept running through the night. Blake got sick on the last lap. He was throwing up. He had one of the blankets. He run half the lap with the blanket around him and then threw it over in the woods. And when we come back by, we picked the blanket up. But shortly before, or a little after 6 o'clock on Saturday morning, we had completed our first 100 miles. It was 22 hours, and so.
And this is, as Tom mentioned, we all went up to run the Old Dominion 100 miler together, and I was the first one that dropped out with severe leg cramps. So
5 of us went up there, one person finished.
Blake Nolan. So after this race was over, since Blake was the only one to finish the Old Dominion, Tom and Jerry went on and they completed a 100-miler after that, and they kept asking me, Charlie, when are you going to do your 100-mile? We've all completed one and you haven't. I said, well, when you can find one that's not in the mountains and not in the summertime, I'll run it. So they came up to me after they had decided they were going to organize this race and said, we're starting this Umstead 100-miler. It's going to be the last weekend in April. It's not in the mountains. It's not going to be in the summertime. We're calling your bluff. You got to run it. So the first one, well, actually the second one, 1995, the first one that Tom and Blake let other people join in, was in 1995. So I did run it that year, and I can't remember my exact time. I think it was 22 hours and 22 minutes. But the thing that I remember most about that race is that it was a small enough race. They only had 38 finishers. I'm not sure how many started, but when I got to 80 miles. Blake, as the race director, things was kind of quiet and some of the runners had dropped out. He said, Charlie, do you want me to run the next lap, which would be a 10-mile lap? And I said, that'd be great. So he ran from 80 to 90 miles with me, and just before we completed that last lap, I said, how about running the last lap with me, Blake? And he agreed to do that. So on the last lap, he was telling me, as we were getting closer, he said, Charlie, I think you're going to beat my time and Tom's time. And I didn't know what their time was. And so I think he told me it was 22 hours and 21 minutes or something, or 22 hours and 24 minutes. So I ran it in 22 hours and 21 minutes or something. Found out later that he went back and checked the records, and they really were a minute faster than me or something. So
Hopefully he didn't alter the record in it.
He promised he did not alter the records. But to me, being able to finish that race with Blake, for him to be able to run that 20 miles with me, which as the race, as it went on through the years, the race got much bigger, and he was not able to do that. So that's kind of, hoped I had a little part in them deciding to start the race, just so it would allow me to complete my first 100-miler. And so I did it, and then Jerry and I did it together in 2004, I believe it was, and we both finished in under 24 hours, so that was good. And then Blake and Jerry and I went out to Arkansas in 1997 and ran a 100-miler out there. So if it hadn't been for them developing this race, I would have stopped. I would never would have tried another 100-miler because I just cramp up so bad when the weather's hot. I just couldn't handle it. So.
100-mile races were really Blake's race. He didn't do that great in marathons or 50-milers, but 100-milers, he had so much determination and just such a tough guy that it was just, and he kind of had a cast iron stomach, it seemed like. He could just keep stuffing the food in, and that's so important in, continuing to run for 100 miles and being able to continue to eat like that. So he's just a tough guy, and the 100-milers were his race, and so he loved the camaraderie that was involved with 100-mile races. He just loved the type of people that ran in 100-mile races. They were just because they were tough like him, I guess, and for that reason, he had a strong passion for getting this race started, making it better and better and better each year.
I think some of the important things about the race, the first year we were so poor, we went out and bought the food on Friday and set up and started the race on Saturday. We dug actually holes and put curtains around it on each end of the 5-mile sections for latrines for toilets. We didn't even have porta johns. And we did that for a couple of years, and then later on we had some folks that worked at the park that probably would have locked us up if they would have known what we had done that year, because they were you had to go much closer to the rule book, and so I think we probably broke every rule that the park had that first year. We even built a fire, and they had we were in the middle of a drought, and there was not supposed to be any fires anywhere, open fires anywhere in the area, much less the park. And Blake had built a rip-roaring fire for the people to stay warm at night. And some guy came by and said, "If you don't get that fire out, I'm calling the police out here." So we lost our fire for the people to stay warm by. But it was quite an experience. The thing I remember is being so tired after that first one, and as we were driving back, Blake started to ask the question, "Do we want to do this again?" I said, Let's don't ask that. I don't know if we would answer that the way we want to answer it if we had to make that decision right now. So we didn't, and we did decide to go ahead and do it. And I think now we've probably become one of the top races in the country in ultra running.
Yeah, that's one of the most amazing things to me is that how it started. It was such a small race to start with, not knowing if it was going to survive the 1 year, and now this 21 years later, it's still going on. It's gotten so much better, but the one thing about it from the very beginning to now, the aid stations that this race have, I mean, any kind of food that you want is provided. It's not about how much it costs to race. It's about making sure that the runners have what they need so that they can successfully complete a 100-mile. Because there are so many of them that are in the mountains and in hot weather. That this is one that gives the most opportunity for an ultra runner to complete the first 100-miler. And the course has changed over the years, but in the last several years it's been a 12.5-mile loop, and so you get to see people throughout the race, and so the runners can encourage each other. Like I say, the aid stations are just super. There are enough volunteers now that, unlike Tom the first year who had one aid station completely by himself for the whole race, now, there's plenty of volunteers, you work in shifts, so it's just a really nice race to either be a volunteer or to be a runner.
I have run aid station 2 since the 95 race. Me and Blake went back after we did and started the race and sort of glorified our start and called that the inaugural event, but truly the 95 race with the 30 people is the first race. Me and Blake even bought ourselves trophies because we were co-winners that race. So I do have a trophy for the 94 race that we went back and sort of dreamed up the idea of calling that the first race. But it's truly been an experience. We've made so many friends through the years. I've run Aid Station 2 for 20 years, and watching it grow, and now turning it over to the younger generation, and knowing that it's going to go on and hopefully in forever, or it's quite a thing to think about.
And Blake used to always give us money at the aid station people, you know, and he said, if you need to get something, go ahead and get it. And if you need more money than I've given you, go ahead and get it, I'll reimburse you. He said the runners, our support to the runners, that's the most important thing. And so lots of times we tell people, they come by our aid station, we say, if you don't see what you want at our aid station, we will go get it for you. Anything within reason. And I don't think anybody has ever really told us to go out and get a sirloin tip steak or anything, but you know, just them knowing that if they really need something, we will go get it for them. And so that's a, you know, important thing when you run a race, is feel like whatever you need, they'll get it for you. And so we really just had 2 aid stations almost all the time, but there was one year when we had the course all scrambled up differently, because I don't know if it was a hurricane or what that year. But so we had 3 aid stations. Had the one back at main camp, and then we had the aid station that Tom and I usually do, and then they split Charlie and me off, and we had a separate aid station over in another location. And you know, there was so much food so frequently on that course that people just didn't know what to make of it, because you know, they'd get something to eat back at main camp, and then they'd go to Tom's aid station, and they'd get a hamburger and a hot dog, and then they'd come to my aid station. I'd be flipping hot dogs and hamburgers over there too. So, you know, they were just, they almost didn't know what to make of it. It was almost too much.
It's probably the only ultra race that you gain weight while you're running instead of losing it.
The only mishap we had that year is I took, I think it was at least 2 dozen eggs, might have been 3 dozen eggs, and put them in a big pot to boil inside the house that was there with our aid station. And I forgot it was in there for about 3 hours. So those eggs were just, I mean, it's hard to ruin a hard-boiled egg, but they were too much. They were just burnt, and because all the water had boiled out by then, they were just frying in the shell. So I ruined about 3 dozen eggs, but there was still plenty of other food we could find. That's right.
The first 20 years of the race, with Blake as the race director, he was totally in charge. The 3 of us have been there all those years only because of our friendship with each other and with Blake, and we probably would not have stuck it out for anybody but Blake, but we've been running together, known each other for so long. But Blake was the most organized race director I've ever seen. And he would make the arrangements with the park and make sure all the permits were in place, and you know, then he knew exactly what to do, and he pulled other people in to help him. And to me, the most amazing thing, the reason that the race is successful, because of his leadership, and throughout the years, he started as the race got bigger, he started involving other people. We got the North Carolina Roadrunners Club involved. They're bringing in lots of volunteers, and that's why now this race will go on for as long as we want it to, because of the volunteer base that it has.
That's right. The volunteers are the key to the race. Without them, we could not possibly do the race. It would not be nearly as good a race, and it is the future of the race. So although you have leadership people and the race director have to put in a tremendous amount of time, it would just be absolutely impossible without all the volunteer help we have. A 100-mile race is not something you can watch like a football game. You know, it just doesn't quite have the kind of appeal, spectator appeal that a football game has. And partially for that reason, it's just not that well known.
And the park is open throughout the entire race, so you've got other people in the park, and it's amazing how many of them will say, "What's going on here today? What are you guys doing?" But we do have a lot of local runners, but the runners come from all over the United States, and I think over the years we've even had a few from Germany and maybe some other countries. So it's in the ultra running world, it's really well known, and it builds up very quickly. And there are some local runners, but for the most part, like Jerry said, the community doesn't really know that much about it, I don't think.
One year, I was here, like I worked in the kitchen most of the time, but this man came up and he was just kind of wandering around, and I said, is there something I can help you with? And he said, and he was probably around 50, and he said, well, he said, I've lived in Raleigh for all my life. He said, I was born here. And for the last few years, I keep hearing all these yells going up in the park and all these, you know, happy sounds and things. And he said, I just thought I'd come out here and see what's going on. He said, I never even knew this park was here. I couldn't believe that, as old as he was, but he said he had just never been in here before. So I thought that was kind of neat that the whole community could hear it. So,
Everybody gets excited when they finished 100 miles, that's for sure.
I'm Rhonda Hampton. I'm the 2015 race director. I've been race director since 12 o'clock noon on the finishing of the 2014 Umstead 100.
You've been in training for...
I've been in training to be race director for about 5 or 6 years. I ran my first 100 here. Well, I ran my first 50 here in 2005, my first 100 in 2006. And then I started just volunteering a lot after that.
I started helping with doing cleanup. I think Blake was kind of amazed that anybody enjoyed doing cleanup. And so we had to spend lots of time up into the race, and he found out that I had great interest and love for the race. So it meant something to him, and so he started asking me if I'd like to think about taking over when he decided not to be race director. So we started training a little bit at a time.
That's all you want to say?
Right now? Let's introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm Joe Luciano. I'm the assistant race director and the race statistician. I started working with Blake at the beginning of the race when it first started. As Tom and Jerry mentioned, I happened to be out here training when they were out here doing their first attempt at the 24 Umstead 100 miler as a pilot run. And at the time, I had been running ultras for a few years, so I had some experience. And a buddy of mine and I had developed a race management program and had been doing race results for the Vermont race. So since they decided that they were going to put on a 100-miler, I offered to do the results for them. And that's how I kind of got started with the race. It's in my hometown. I thought, a great place for a race, and would have been unhappy if I didn't get a chance to support these guys, because I knew them from running in the park and other activities. We started off with just a 100-miler, but in the second year of the race, we decided to add a 50-miler to the race. And one of the major goals of the Umstead 100-miler at the time was to, Blake's interest was in promoting ultra running in this area. Because if we looked around, we were the main ultra runners in this whole area at that point that we knew of. There were a few others that we had come across in the park, but it was a very small ultra community. So one of our major goals was to try to promote ultra running, the longer distance running in this area. It's a large community of runners, and we felt that we could get people involved with the race and hopefully encourage them to tackle the distances beyond the marathon. So we, in the second year, set up a 50-miler, and I used that race as one of my key training races for the Vermont race that I did in July. And for many years, we had just acrylic plaques that we were providing or allowed the runners to buy. And then we came up with this idea of doing a belt buckle. That was Will Brown's contribution to the race. He was primarily in charge of sending out the plaques and after the race. So he designed a nice sub 24 hour and sub 30 hour belt buckle. And I thought, oh, that'd be a nice buckle to have. So I did one of the hundreds here the first year we did it. But being involved with the race, doing the results was kind of my initial involvement, but just with friendship through Blake and Myra, we did a lot of things together, did a lot of bike riding, and Blake and I became more intimately involved with the race on a weekly, monthly, almost daily basis in many cases, and more so over the years, where we did a lot of planning and a lot of work to keep the race fresh and to make sure that we were reaching the running community that we wanted to reach. And by so doing, we had, over the last 20 years, we've probably reached over 2,000 ultra runners, individual ultra runners who have run the race, and have, as a major part of our race, have encouraged first-time ultra runners. So that's been a major focus. And in many of our years, probably in the last 10, 15 years, probably half of the race has been made up of first-time 100-mile runners. So it's been a major goal, as the guys have said earlier. Our major objective was to put on a top-quality race that would bridge that gap from the really tough 100-milers from out in the West to the courses where it's more likely that a person is able to get a finish under 24 hours. We've changed the course many times. Blake and I have hand measured this course a couple of times, and we've had it certified so that we know that the effort that we put into making sure that it is a 100-mile distance, that it's an accurate distance. And so by having it certified, we can do that. And we've had national records set on this course for a 100-mile distance. We also try to make sure that we give the runners results that give them a good picture of how they did in the race at different points. I've been running ultra since 1988, and one of the key things that I'm always interested in, particularly in long races like the 100-miler, where you have many different aid stations that you would record or need your times at, that I know how I did at various points in the race. And so we tried to make sure that we would provide to the runners more accurate results on their splits, and a lot of people use that information. We also keep track of the statistics of each runner and where they stand in relation to other runners. So we have a course record that's in the 13-hour range. That was a national record. And that's something that we've been able to draw a lot of top runners to this race because of not only the quality of our aid stations, but also the accuracy of our course. And even though we have 8,000 feet of elevation change over that 100 miles, that it still is a course where records can be set, not just for the fastest runners, but also age group runners. We've had records of in the 70s, and women in the 60s who have set national records. So, we've really tried to make sure that we maintain a course and a race with a lot of high quality to it.
A lot of personal records in it too.
And a lot of personal records are made as well because of it. But the other aspect of it, and a thing where our aid stations are critical, and especially our headquarters. And that's the fact that we try to really support the crews. A lot of people forget about the families. And a lot of runners come here with their families year after year after year. And Myra has established a tradition in the kitchen of providing that really top quality service, not just to the runners, but also to the runners' crews, their families, other people that come in. And I think that's gotten a lot of people involved with the race as well.
Blake told me that the reason why they wanted to take such good care of the crew and the family is because when all of the guys would go to the different races, and they could be out in the middle of nowhere, and their wives wouldn't have anything to eat. They were crewing them, but they couldn't crew and they would be there, and they wouldn't feed them at the aid stations. And he's like, at our aid station, we're going to take care of everybody. And we do. Our budget is huge on food, and it always will be because we'll take care of them. All of my goal for the future is to continue on the same path that we've been each year, trying to get a little better at a time. It's at a point right now where it's really awesome, and you think, well, how can you get any better? But Blake was always able to find, or Tom at the aid stations, or timing wise, we try just one little thing that makes it a little better. Blake pulled in a snowball machine for when it's really hot, and there's been a nice little addition and things like that. And so again, trying to just stay on that same path of a little bit better, taking better care of the runners, servicing the runners. The best thing though is taking care of the volunteers, and it's been really neat because our volunteers, they start off as volunteers, but then they become our runners too. Again, it's part of that building of the community, and the community here is huge now, and I really believe that it's all because of the Umstead 100 and what they wanted to do with ultra runners. A lot of people have done their first 100 here and in their community. It really makes it a great place to start with the race.
Yeah, when you think about the volunteers, we started off small, as the guys said earlier. Originally this race was staffed by just the families. And when you think about servicing 30, 40, 50, 60 runners, that are scattered around, and every couple of hours they might come in, that's a lot of waiting for those families. But to be up for 30 hours or more, and generally we're up for, 36, 48 hours setting up, preparing, and cleaning up. But when you think about what it takes, the volunteers just make a tremendous difference. Started off small, and as Blake has been able to get different groups involved, we started adding pacers. That has added 60 to 70 volunteers just doing pacing. And so many of those pacers started off 12 and a half miles and 25 miles, and the next year they want to run our 50-mile option. So that was the other key change that we made in the race. Many 100-milers, if you don't finish the 100-miler, you could stop at 97 and a half miles. But as far as the race is concerned, you'd just DNF'd. Whereas here, we have an option that if you've completed at least 50 miles, we give credit to people for completing at least that distance. So a lot of people will come just to do 50 miles, and for many people, it's their first 50 mile. So then you think about the volunteers, and many of them, we have a Harley group that comes in, that they were brought in through our former aid station captains, Sally Squire and Bill Squires. And they've been with us, cooking hamburgers, flipping hamburgers and hot dogs, and
running.
running.
Sally and Bill, we believe we're the first couple over 70 years of age to complete 100 together. And they did that 2 years ago. I took over taking care of the volunteers around 2008. And I would always tell everybody, oh, come and volunteer. And they're like, oh, you just want volunteers. And I'm like, no, this is a gift I'm giving you to volunteer. This is the most special place I've ever volunteered because ultra runners are so nice. And I have actually gotten thank you notes from volunteers for telling them about this opportunity to volunteer. And it's because of what all of the people at the beginning of this race have brought together and made something really special. And as a goal is to maintain that specialness so that it's there, and that we'll just keep adding things and making it better because we want to keep everyone feeling like it's a family. And I'll get letters now. People say, "Oh, I can't be at the race." It's like missing a reunion, and it's a really special place.
But tell me about the brewing hotel when she came. You know, Jack was in a stroller and she was carrying Carly. Played with her, and now they're still coming.
You want to tell it?
No.
You're doing such a good job.
You're welcome to come in.
You can tell that.
I just want to thank Honorable Mention because they're just crew and they came in, and those kids now they're like 16. Jack's a senior. They're still coming. They volunteer every year. The kids are now great volunteers.
Yeah, Dave Burlington has been doing our race for many years, and he brings his family with him. And his wife Barb has been dedicated for volunteer in the kitchen. But as their children have grown, they've become very active and involved with working in the kitchen and helping out at the aid station, wherever they can. So it's interesting to see the families. We've had Susan Rosansky from Chicago area who created M&Ms one year that had the race logo on them. We've had people who have given things to the race, because of their volunteer activity and their racing activity. We have an 18-time finisher. We have a number of people who are 1,000-mile finishers, and when they come and they bring their families, we've watched some of these families and their children grow. So it's been kind of exciting to see them and to be a part of their lives because, as Ronnie said, it's just part of the family. And one of the things that we try to do with our volunteers is we're constantly on the lookout for different gifts to give to volunteers. A lot of races give out a T-shirt and that's it. Well, it kind of gets old after a while. So we end up with, special volunteers that are out there always looking for, what are some new, unique gifts that we can give our volunteers. And we have over 300 volunteers that support this race.
Blake's favorite gift, I think, for volunteers is an ice cream scoop. Where did he find the ice cream scoop?
We found it at our timeshare up in Cashier. But one of my favorite things, and I think Blake's too, is he started the last walker, the last runner that came in, would get a Norwoody. When we would be on our vacations, we'd go out in the woods and cut down saplings, treasure saplings, sticks that he would make smooth and dry, and they became, we nicknamed the Norwoody stick, and the last male runner and the female runner would get a Norwoody stick. And that kind of became, it got to be a game sometimes where they would try, if the last two would fall back so that they could hopefully get the Norwoody stick. But, and also, I just want to throw in from when we were talking about the community, the volunteers, I hear it at least once every year, and often more, like we get people from Canada and the Dakotas and different places, but they call it the race with the Southern hospitality, and I think that kind of sticks. I hear that a lot.
All right, Maya, I do have one question for you. What was your reaction when Blake told you he wanted to organize and host a 100-mile race?
Well, knowing Blake, it wasn't the first big vision thing that I'd heard of, but I didn't realize that it would involve me so much, to tell you the truth, or our house, or our attic, or our garage, or our basement, or all the storage space we had. But, you know, it grew slowly. I mean, it didn't start out being as large as it is here. But I have to say, we had so much fun.
Yeah.
And I can't talk for that, but it really was a 365-day event at our home. Like, we would go out and find, like, if we needed to find extra Gatorade, we'd start out with the stores here, then we'd go to Goldsboro and Fayetteville, and we just would make day adventures of it, and we would just collect what we needed all over the state, and he was always thinking the race, and it was fun.
He called me one Thanksgiving and he goes, I found these great gloves at Sam's. Would you stop on your way back from Kentucky at every Sam's and find the gloves? Our volunteers would love these gloves. I stopped at every Sam's on the way home from Kentucky. So proud of you too. I didn't find a glove anywhere, but I stopped at every Sam's.
And we'd do that for flashlights, and he loved it. He loved the race.
Yeah, we did all that for the volunteers, you know, because those are the things that were not common to a race. You don't think about going to a race, being a volunteer, and getting a pair of nice leather gloves, and you know, that was part, nor an ice cream scoop or flashlights, and any place he was at that he found a deal. You know, backpacks and
Lots of hydration packs.
so that was a big thing. But
He really did look after everybody. Like, I know there was one older man from Florida, and he was near the last one in, and his wife, who was real concerned about him because it took him a long time to get in. When I said, well, what does he need? And she said, you mean there's food? And I said, well, yeah. And so she was able to fix him a plate, and she said it was the first race he had ever run that he had food at the end, because usually it's gone by then, people are taken down, but he wanted the last finisher to be just as important.
Any last things?
So it's just thinking,
I think the amazing part in this is they had the option, the guys did, of just stopping the race, saying we're finished, this is it. But 5 years ago, they decided that they wanted it to go on, and they looked for people that cared as much as they did. And they brought us up and showed us what we needed to do, and spent years and years of helping us to know what all needed to be done, and where things needed to go. And they always gave us the care, this is how we like it, but it is this way because this is what we want, and you can grow it into what you want too. But they took such great, wonderful care to train us, and you don't see that a lot. You know, usually we'll switch. Someone says, "Oh, I'll be race director," so the philosophy of the race changes, the whole idea. But what our focus is that the philosophy stays the same, the caring stays the same. The only thing that changes is the individuals who cause all that to happen. And it's really important.
That's something that we've taken a lot of care for, because you just don't throw the race into somebody's lap and expect them to run with it. Our part of the process was to make sure that, number one, we had people that really wanted to do that job. And we gave them options. You know, we met with them and we said, here's the job. We'd give them write-ups on the job, what was involved. We'd make sure that they talked to the previous people who were involved with that aid station, with whatever job it was. You know, so they get the plain scoop, not just some candy-coated explanation of a simple little job, when we know that putting on a race like this and having it maintain its top quality status is something that requires a lot of detail. And we've had people take on the job and decide after they've done it that, this is more than I wanted to take on. And from our perspective, that's fine, because we want people in different positions who are happy, that they like what they're doing, and that they're willing to take it on and do the same caliber of job that we've come to expect, and that our runners have come to expect. So that's a big part of it, is finding the right people to make those transitions. And that's, I think, what we've accomplished. We have gone through almost all of those transitions. And some of those transitions have taken years. As Rhonda said, she's been in training for years. So it's, something that and if we have people who are in those jobs and they want to take a year and run the race, we try to make sure we have enough backup people that can handle that position, that we can allow them to do that. So it's a race of happy volunteers.
Happy volunteers make happy runners and successful runners. If your crew's happy, if the people servicing you are happy, if your family's happy, you're going to be able to finish that race. And that's our whole objective, is to get you through. For some people, it might be their only 100 they do. And it's what they want, and they want to finish. And it's because of all those things together and supporting them. And Blake understood that.